This month, we are going to be talking about the four-step plan. It's not patented or anything, so, a good four-step plan, I guess, is what we'll call it, to turn this country back around. And 2 weeks ago, we talked about step one. I'll refresh you. It was to step up. The church needs to step up and heed the call to be the ones to go out and be the changers of the country, and not ask God to do all the work. Ask God to use us to do His work, I guess is the one way to put it. We want to sit back and pray and ask that God change things without us getting our hands dirty. Well, we need to be willing to say, here I am, send me. So step one for us was to step up and heed the call to go out and help change this country. Today we're going to talk about step two, but I want to tell you a story about Mayor Booker. He's currently the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. But before he became mayor, he tells of a story before he became mayor. Right when he moved to Newark, New Jersey, and he's an African American raised in a middle to upper class family. But when he moved to Newark, New Jersey, he moved to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, which in most cities is probably not a desirable street address. So he moves into town and he wants to change things. I guess probably sitting in his apartment and he's thinking, okay, here I am, send me. So he finds out that if he wants to get anything done, he needs to go across the street and talk to the lady who runs the projects. So he's like, all right, I want to get things done. So he goes over, climbs up the 5 flight of stairs, knocks on her door, and there's this little old lady, and he's like, I'm here to help you. My name is Cory Booker. I'm a recently graduated law school, and I want to help. Here I am, send me, essentially is what he's saying. So, and he was expecting her to be, drop down to her knees and be like, oh, our Savior's here, and so she looked at him, and that's not what happened. She looked at him and she said, okay, you want to help? And so she walked him back down the 5 flight of stairs, went into the middle of the road on the median, traffic still passing, and she goes, if you want to help, I need to know, what do you see? So he starts looking around and he's like, well, I see a run-down drug house, I see some prostitutes, I see some slums, and she just looked at him and she shook her head. And she goes, you can't help me. And she turned around and walked away. Well, here he is, this law student graduate, law school graduate, and thinking, I can help, and he's kind of hurt. So he chases after her and he's like, wait a second, why can't I help? She goes, because all you see is problems. I need someone who sees hope. Now, when we want to change things, we tend to only see problems, but we need to see hope. Today we're going to be talking about, first we said, here I am, send me. Okay, where are we going now? Where are we going? What are we going to be doing? What are we going to see? What should we expect to see if we are going to be this change agent that God is going to use to help us change this country? And I want you to turn in Matthew 10 and we'll read verses 5 through 8. This is where Jesus first sends out the 12. He's going to send them out and he's going to give them a message to bring with them. Let me start with, I'll start with, we'll go to 10:5. 10:5. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, preach this message. The kingdom of heaven is near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Now, as we read this verse, we see that there are some things that applied only to those disciples, but I also believe that you can still look at that and make it apply to us today as we are sent out. First, he obviously says, don't go to the Gentiles, but we know that's different now because the gospel message way back when Paul went to the Gentiles and were essentially Gentiles, so the message now goes to everyone. So we're not given parameters of who to give our message to or not. We're to give the message to everyone, but we still need to go out and give this message, the message that the kingdom of heaven, and he says the kingdom of heaven is near, and we now say the kingdom of heaven is here. But I say near, well, yeah, you can say as near as your face is to you. The kingdom of heaven is here now. So that's our other alteration to the message. The kingdom of heaven is here with us. And then he starts talking about healing. Now, when they went out, they were to do some actual physical healings. They were given the power to do these actual physical healings. He didn't send them with medicine kits, or anything like that. They were to do some healings. They were to show that the kingdom of heaven was near. Now, we're not to go out and do these physical healings of the sick. Now, we can pray, and we do believe that these healings still occur, miracles still occur through prayer. But I think if we want to make this apply more to us today, we can say we're to be sent out and heal the sin sick. Okay, so when we read this now, here I am, send me. Okay, kingdom of heaven is here. Go out and heal the sin sick. And then, of course, we're not going to be raising the dead, but there are the spiritual dead that we need to, through rebirth, give new life through the gospel message. So there is a still raising of the dead. And I thought it was interesting that it chose leprosy as the disease to heal. He said, go out and heal those who have leprosy. Why not anything else? And I think, well, what is leprosy? When you think of leprosy, that is the one disease that made you an outcast. That is the one disease where you were separated. A special colony was made for you, away from everybody else. So I said, how can we apply this to us? Let's go out and heal the social outcasts. Those that nobody wants to touch, nobody wants to go near. They've been cast out of society. So we have the social outcasts. And then we say, drive out demons. Many of us think we know a demon-possessed person or two. And they still exist today, but we also know that there's just those that are having that spiritual battle within them, that Satan is leading them in a sinful lifestyle that we need to rescue. So this call can directly apply to us today, even though we're not doing the same exact things that they did. We're still going out and bringing the kingdom of heaven with us. And that's one thing that I want to talk about. Is step 2 for us is the church needs to step out. Now the thing I want to focus on today is when God sends us out, when we step up and say, here I am, send me. You see, just like when Mayor Booker was asked what he saw and he pointed out the negative things, we too point out negative things we see. What we need to do is see hope, not hopelessness. How many of you actually would sign up for something if you told the situation was hopeless? We need volunteers, but I'm going to tell you it's hopeless. Nobody's going to sign up for it. Some people might actually, but would soon concede defeat because they went in thinking it was hopeless anyway. Well, I failed, but they told me it was hopeless, so I might as well just give up. But if we see hope where we're going to work, until we're going to work at it until the things that we had hoped for actually come true. If we see hope in something, we're going to stick to it until it actually becomes that thing that we envisioned when we first started. So when we look at the sin sick, the spiritually dead, the social outcasts, and the demon possessed, we need to look at them with hope, not hopelessness. Now we're going to look back at that passage that we just read, and what was the one statement there that gives us the most hope? Through Matthew 10, 5 through 8, there's one statement in there that gives us hope, that should bring hope to those people, and that is, as you go preach this message, the kingdom of heaven is near. And we say the kingdom of heaven is here. That gives more hope than anything else we could ever imagine. That is a message of hope. The kingdom of heaven is here, and now what I want you to do, metaphorically, draw me a picture of what the kingdom of heaven looks like in your head. Draw me a picture of what the kingdom of heaven looks like, and then describe it to me, and whoever's the closest wins. Okay, because we actually can't draw what the kingdom of heaven looks like. Actually, if you walk up and if you had to ask a child that, they're going to draw what they think heaven looks like. And unfortunately, that's kind of the mistake that we get today, is we think that we're living now for something distant, but we're living now for something now. The kingdom of heaven is here. So how do we draw it? What does it look like? How do we know what it looks like? Turning your Bibles to Matthew 13, and this is where we're going to stay for the rest of the afternoon or the morning, until it carries over into the afternoon if I talk long enough. Matthew 13, starting in verse 24. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may root up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring them into my barn." Now I'll go down to verse 47. "Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into a lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fisherman pulled it up on the shore. Then he sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where they will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So here we have two parables about what the kingdom of heaven is like. The first one has good seed being planted, but by the work of the enemy, weeds grow among the wheat. And what I find interesting here is the response. The response of the servant to all this: "Do you want us to go pull them up?" Get them out of your sight. Get them out of our sight. Really, they don't want to look at the weeds. He's asking if they should remove the wheat or the weeds from the sight of the master, but we know that the servants really just don't want to look at the weeds either. But the master tells them to leave them because some of the wheat might be uprooted. It will all be sorted out in the end. Now think about it. It will all be sorted out in the end. If that is the case, why are we trying to sort it out right now? Now think about this. Everybody on this side is wheat. Not really. We're just trying to don't worry over here. Everybody on this side is wheat, and everybody on this side is wheat. The wheat side, I don't want you to look at the weed side. And the weed side, I don't want you looking at the wheat side. Okay? We're not looking at each other. Okay? This is what the world looks like right now. The wheat side separate from the weeds. Not looking at each other, not talking to each other. Even though we are not allowed to pluck up the weeds, we replant ourselves in fields of wheat where there are no weeds. Think about your life and the people you hang out with. How many weeds do you see? How many weeds do you hang out with? Now, I'm not talking about people who follow Jesus, but just in a different way. I'm talking about people who have no idea who Jesus is or have never acknowledged him as their Savior. How often do you find yourself with the weeds? Or maybe we should call them the sin sick or the spiritually dead. Social outcasts or demon possessed. Some of you might be thinking, no thank you, I'd rather stay in the wheat field where there are no weeds. Things look better there. But the kingdom of heaven is not like a wheat field with no weeds. It is where the wheat and the weeds grow together. Heaven is a wheat field. Okay? Where we go when we die, our great homecoming is the wheat field. But the kingdom of heaven that is among us right now is like a wheat field where there are weeds. What about the parable of the net? When the net is let down, is only one kind of fish brought up? No. It was the good fish and the bad fish. And then there's going to be a separation. The bad fish will be tossed into the fiery furnace. That must mean that the fish were swimming in the same water. But most of us swim in schools of fish, of like fish, and change direction when we see bad fish. We're all swimming in the same school of fish, and we try to steer away whenever we see that bad school of fish. What do you think Jesus sees when he looks at America today? Do you think he sees the wheat fields and wheat fields? One wheat field over here, one weed field. Well, I think he sees separate fields. Or do you think he sees a field where both wheat and weed grow together? Or does he see separate schools of fish swimming in different bodies of water? Or does he see one ocean with good and bad fish swimming together? Our step for today is to step out. And if the church is going to play an active part in making America blessable, we need to step out. And I don't necessarily mean step out of the church building, because we're going to do that either way. We're going to step out of here today as soon as I'm done talking. We need to replant ourselves amongst the weeds. Now, that sounds weird that we say we need to replant ourselves, because some of us have replanted ourselves away from the weeds. We need to swim with the bad fish. And I don't mean run with a bad crowd. You know, like your parents always warn you, don't run with a bad crowd. But we need to make sure that when that net is pulled up, there are some good fish in with the bad fish, because the bad fish just won't get the message that there's no good fish around. If we're going to heal the sin sick, what do we need to do? We need to be around the sin sick. Yes, it would be nice if we had the long distance healing power that Jesus had. I know someone across the street that's sin sick, and please, God, heal them, and don't send me over there to do anything, and bam, they're healed. Jesus was able to do that. He was able to heal from afar, but we're not. We're not able to just ask for someone to be healed or say you're healed from their sin sickness and they're healed. And we can't just wait for them to come to us. We need to go to them. And we need to know, where can we find these sin-sick, spiritually dead, social outcast, demon-possessed people? Well, we might associate these type of people with bars or strip clubs, but I don't think that is where we need to go plant ourselves, okay? Don't say that's, again, swimming with a bad crowd. We're not trying to swim with a bad crowd. We don't need to go to these places, and fortunately, most of these people don't live. I say most, because some might actually live in these places, bars or strip clubs. But they do have homes, and they have jobs, and they have other things that they like to do. Now, we can't just go barge into their homes and plant ourselves there either. Maybe. But we can eat next to them at lunch, or talk to them when we see them walking by, or go to places that seem more neutral. Bowling alley, or some other place that we know we're going to be surrounded by weeds. Maybe some non-church group in town. Coach a Little League team. Just do that in there for me. Visit prisons. And I'm here to tell you, actually, the latter of the two is more desirable. You don't want to coach a Little League team, but you can go visit a prison. As easy it is, the solution sounds. Historically, we have seen these people as having no hope. Have you ever heard someone say there's no hope for the children today? Maybe we've even thought it. Or maybe there's no hope for this guy at work. He's lost all hope. Well, if Christians have lost hope in him, then maybe he has lost all hope. Even though Jesus still has hope for him. Christ brings hope to people through the church. If the church looks and sees a hopeless situation, then it will refuse to get involved. We only want to be part of something successful. I'm going to tell you about a movie. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's Fallen. Denzel Washington is in it, and he plays a detective. I think it's a detective. And there was a man in the movie that was just recently executed for murder. He did some horrible murders. Well, within him, there's this evil spirit. And even though he dies, if there's someone nearby, the spirit jumps to that next person. Now, I think Denzel Washington's character kind of gets a glimpse of this. So he sees it happening, and he sees this spirit following him, and he realizes the only way to kill this spirit is to lure it out into the middle of the woods where there's nobody else it can jump to but just him and that spirit. And of course, he ends up taking his life, so that spirit has nowhere to go. So what it is that spirit has nowhere else to spread to, so then it just seems to die. Of course, in the movie, although it sees a cat, we're not going to get into that. Well, what if this is how the kingdom of heaven worked? As long as we put ourselves in close contact with those who are outside it, it will continue to grow. But if we move into seclusion, it will cease to grow. If we put ourselves in the middle of the woods with nobody around us, even though we have this wonderful thing that we were freely given and we were supposed to freely give, if we have nobody to give it to, it's not going to grow. Matthew 13:33, Jesus told another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large amount of flour until it worked all through the dough. How many pieces of yeast do we have here today? I'm not going to count you. Someone else's job. We have several pieces of yeast here today. But let's think about it. If we take all the pieces of yeast together, and then we have the flour over here, and we don't mix the yeast with the flour, is the flour going to grow? No, we're just going to have a batch of yeast over here. But if we just take one piece of yeast and move it into the flour is going to grow. It's going to turn into dough. And this is the one of the very few occasions where yeast is seen as a positive thing. Many times we see yeast as being a bad thing or evil that can spread. But yeast, for this occasion, the Spirit of heaven, the yeast is a good thing. So if we have this many pieces of yeast in here, and we each go to our own separate batch of flour, and I want to think about how many batches of flour do you belong to that nobody else belongs to that's here in this packet of yeast? How many? Is there any that you can think of? Do you say, I'm the only one? Now, some of us work, but some of us work with quite a few pieces of yeast that are here. You know, I mean, that's great, you know, but then think about, is there a time where there's no other familiar piece of yeast around you and you're just surrounded by flour? It doesn't happen that much. Because we're constantly trying to find that other piece of yeast that we are familiar with, that we're comfortable with. We are comfortable with each other. We're not comfortable out there amongst the weeds, or amongst the bad fish, or with the flour. But that is what the kingdom of heaven is like. This is what we're told. We're told the kingdom of heaven is like this. And this is what we need to do to help change this country. We need to start putting ourselves in positions where we can allow the kingdom of heaven to be here for everyone. And we say the kingdom of heaven is here, but I don't see any weeds here. You know, we need to bring weeds with us as well, but we need to always have weeds around us if we're going to spread it. And we look out and we see a lot of weeds. There's just a lot of weeds. There's a lot of weeds in this community. There's a lot of bad fish in this community. There's a lot of flour in this community. And the message that we're to give is the kingdom of heaven is here. Can we give that message without actually getting near them? We can shout it at them. But then the good news about that message is that we are to heal the sin sick. We are to raise the spiritually dead. We are to bring back the social outcasts, and we are to cast out the demons. We're only going to do that like this, being like this with them. We can't replant ourselves in different areas and expect to be able to be used by God. Whenever he sent one of his prophets, they had to go somewhere. You know, it's not like outsourcing. He couldn't call someone else and have him do it for him. which is really what we're doing when we pray for God to do stuff for us, trying to outsource. Can you do it? No, I don't want to replant myself amongst the weeds. But that's what Jesus tells us what the kingdom of heaven is like. If you see yourself with a bunch of weeds, the kingdom of heaven is here. You are the piece of yeast to make that dough rise. But if we don't put ourselves in those positions, we're not going to see it. Let me tell you, today, Cory Booker is a very successful mayor. Well, he lost his first run at mayor. But he's a very successful mayor in the city of Newark, New Jersey. And he always looks back to that time where he felt called to go help that city. And he went to that city, and he went to the person that he knew he had to go to, and he said, here I am, I want to help. And she said, if you want to help, you need to see hope. Because that's what's going to lead to change. We go out as pieces of whatever parable you want to use to think, if you want to think of yourself as a piece of yeast, or if you want to think about yourself as a good fish, or if you want to think about yourself as a strand of wheat. Whatever it takes you to think, am I surrounding myself with the right people to make this happen? Use it. Because all of those have hope. Once we start looking at it as hopeless, yanking them out, which is what we want to do. I mean, we weed our gardens, right? I mean, we have to weed our gardens. It's a dirty job. But because we don't want to look at the weeds, we don't want the weeds to ruin the flowers. Really, we just don't want to look at the weeds, and they're taking the nourishment from whatever's in there. We want them out of our sight, but we can't do that with the people that Jesus has put in our lives to bring to Him. Step 2 is to step out, see hope, and become that change agent that God has put us here to be, to bring the kingdom of heaven here. Let us pray.